足揃え足揃え水に映った宝衣お化けつづらに鼓みのね桑の実をつけた話とね
And welcome to episode 102 of the Red Leaf Retrocast. I'm your host JD, joined only by Colin today. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I've had an eventful 6 weeks since the last cast.
Me too. Me too. I don't know if you heard the past wrestling podcast, but I had some car trouble. That's very... told the whole story over there, so it involves breaking down at the bowling alley, a broken bike tire. It's a whole feeling terrible from mid pork, one might say. It's quite the experience. You got anything like that you're gonna share today?
Not particularly. I mean, yeah, I've been on vacation this past week.
Yeah, happy belated Canadian Thanksgiving. Didn't get to say that last time since you were, having holiday.
Yeah. My family decided to have Thanksgiving on that day, and I can't skip out on that, so you didn't see me.
It's all right. Joey is unfortunately not able to join us today because yesterday was his birthday, and he is quite hungover, so I totally understand. Been there indeed. He did, however, close out a contract on a house, so congratulations to my best buddy over there.
Very nice.
I asked if I could move in with him, pay rent, and he's like, no, the wife wouldn't like that. I'm like, oh, come on. What a lame answer. I would have moved in with him. I would have treated him nice sometimes.
Sometimes.
So what you got for me, Colin? What's your story? What's your update?
Well, a few Sundays ago, I went to Canada's Wonderland for the first time in forever.
Oh, hell yeah. Love that place.
Yeah. Yeah, I was busy as ever, but I needed the experience. And yeah, there was lots of waiting in line involved, but while doing so, fortunately, I brought a couple of my portable consoles with me, so whipped out my Vita and revisited Iconoclasts.
Ah, yes. I never did beat that.
Yeah, me either. But thing is, I couldn't continue from where I left off because the digital copy on my memory card was fatally glitched, so I had to delete and reinstall the game.
Ooh.
So there went my save file, but it's probably for the best because I would have been pretty lost with the plot if I had started from there after all this time.
Right. And for those that are kind of lost on the relevance of the story, Colin and I used to go to Wonderland quite a few times, to the point where I even had season tickets to this place in Toronto. And there was one time I brought my Neo Geo Pocket Color, and we beat Sonic the Hedgehog on that sucker in line throughout the day. It was quite funny.
Yeah.
Such a random thing to bring, but it's so tiny and compact that it just could slip it in my little breast pocket there. No problem.
Yeah. For those wondering, Iconoclasts is an indie Metroidvania game with a pretty complicated plot. You play as Robin, a forbidden mechanic in a land ruled over by the One Concern, who are a religious cult that has an iron grip on a precious resource called ivory, which is used for powering the technology of the land and occasionally granting people superpowers. And by extension, they have an iron grip on society. And One Concern pretty much dictates every aspect of every citizen's lives, including their careers. And since Robin is not authorized to be a mechanic, she eventually has a run-in with some elite One Concern soldiers and spends pretty much the rest of the game trying to evade them and or defeat them. And What makes the game special is the simple but effective gameplay, the challenging but fair puzzles, and the boss fights are super fun and creative. And it's got good pixel art too, and the characters are all pretty well written.
Yeah, it's
even
got
though
that
Robin,
good 16-bit era style to it all. It plays real tight
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was all made by one guy.
Could be. I don't have that information on hand.
Yeah, he apparently made another game. I'm trying to remember what it is. It was like before that. It was like a beat 'em up of sorts that had a similar art style and similarly creative boss fights. Can't remember what it is though.
Anyways, what else you got?
See if I can find it while I move on to the next. Let's see. Here we go. And I went to Fan Expo yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just I found myself missing the con experience back in September, and I figured I'd just reserve a ticket for one day.
Fill in the audience what Fan Expo is again.
It's basically a geek convention of sorts here in Canada, although I think it also gets hosted in places in the States.
I think
Just
it also
going to
has
the-
another few days in Calgary or Edmonton. I can't remember. I think it goes
so.
out west as well for a few trips.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the main draw is the big ass dealer room, but occasionally game companies will come in and give exclusive previews of certain games. And one time when me and JD went, we got to try out PSVR before it got officially released.
It wasn't just the VR; it was also Nintendo Switch, where they had Mario Odyssey
Yeah.
and things going on. Fan
and
Expo is always it never comes across as this stanky con experience. It seems a little bit more on the professional side. It's run by professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of gaming companies go there. It's like a Canadian, I don't want to say E3, but with the amount of video games and prevalent like horror scene that's up there, and it's
a little more like San Diego Comic-Con, I think.
Yeah. I could see that comparison. Sure, never been to San Diego Comic-Con, but I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been either, but seems to be the most famous geek convention out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, this year was more of a low-key affair, thanks to the pandemic.
Yeah, I can imagine gaming companies just aren't up to date. PS5 just doesn't actually exist. Still waiting to get one. Man, it's a rough go. Still have that money saved, Colin.
Yeah. I got a few cool things. I got a little mini poster of the Mandalorian.
Okay.
And
Sasha Banks on the cover?
Maybe. I haven't looked at it in a bit.
I'm sure you don't know who that is. It's fine.
Probably not. And I also got like it's a Legend of Zelda poster done in the style of a Studio Ghibli poster. It's really funny.
Oh, that sounds really cool, actually. You'll have to take a picture of it and send it to me.
Yeah. Or I could find an image on Google or something, and post it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's I also got a bunch of games. It's I got Max Payne 2 for fairly cheap. It's like $15.
Cheap in Canadian prices, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. And I got Trauma Center Under the Knife 2, because I've been curious about that. And Yokai Watch 2, even though I haven't played the first one yet.
Yeah, the first one has that terrible map system in it. but it's a fun little game. I do have the third one, which was better. I never did play the second one. It didn't really change the game too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also got Toki Tori 2 on PS4 of all things.
Toki Tori.
Yeah, that game was surprisingly addicting. So, and for those who don't know, it's a game we covered all the way back in episode 30, the Game Boy cast. Yeah, I just love fun little puzzle games like that. I also recently rewatched The Big Lebowski.
Oh boy!
Since then, I've gotten a taste for White Russians. Don't take that out of context.
I was really hoping you'd say if you've had a taste for the bowling, but whatever. Fine. Don't humor me.
Well, the movie also inspired me to get a living room rug finally. And let me tell you, it really does tie the room together.
Of all the things to take away from that movie.
Well, the whole rug thing is one of the more quoted parts of the movie, so
right, yeah.
Why not?
Still, it's like, you know what I need in my apartments? Not beautiful shelving, not beautiful glassware to show off to guests when I give them a drink. I need a rug. Jeez.
Hey, if you lived in my apartment, you'd understand the necessity.
One of the first things I got when I moved to Toronto was a rug. Because it was just hardwood floors everywhere.
Well, mine's like white marble floors everywhere, so I need something to change it up a little.
Yeah. Well, in terms of stories of things around the house, I'm trying to. So I've been just like Joey. I've been trying to procure a house. See what's available. The market's definitely not something to scream about currently, but. There's some areas I'm looking at that I can actually afford, and this has led me down the path of kind of a spring cleaning and trying to change things up, make things more vertical in the apartment, and over the last 2 weeks, my bed is absolutely shot, okay?
Oh, yeah?
I feel like I'm sleeping on metal. So that spare twin I have, I busted that back out of the closet. I've been sleeping on that for 2 weeks, so I'm like, okay, I gotta get a new bed. And I went to the mattress store, a couple mattress stores, and they have at least one of the places has some of these beds you can get off Amazon, and the Amazon place is actually cheaper. The difference is if you buy it at the mattress store, they can come to your place, get rid of your bed for you, put it together for you, all that. Well, I have a dumpster outside, so I can just get rid of it myself, my shitty queen bed that I got. Well, I tried out a number of different beds, and I tried out 4 different Japanese futons, and these things are incredible. I want one, I need one, and they're like a fourth of the price of a regular going queen bed that had the same level of comfort, and all reviews point to these Japanese beds are actually better for your back and shoulders and whatnot. And I tell you, this 12-year-old bed I have right now, yes, it's 12 years old. Obviously, it's time to get a new one. Like, when you start waking up in pain because your bed is so shit, it's a sign. And I think I'm gonna pull the trigger on one of these Japanese beds, and I just got to pick the right one. And I think I'm gonna go full. Queen's a little bit too big for me, a little bit too much, and with a Japanese bed, you can kind of just fold it out of the way, chuck it in a corner, and then you got more space. See? I'm thinking long term here. And then I think I'm gonna invest in a kotatsu since winter is coming.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I can use my futon as that the my old futon. I could use that as like the cover, and I think I'd be set. And move the couch into my bedroom since I'll have the room with the futon. See, I got this all figured out, Colin. I'm thinking 4D type chess here with the setup, and because of all this extra space, I can actually then put my weight set together.
Ooh.
Start pumping the iron. Yeah. You feeling that?
Hell yeah. Damn right. Through the screen.
Yeah. I got enough Amazon gift card points where I can like redeem and basically pay off like most of this in one go.
Nice.
Yeah. That's my big plan. And then a little Metroid Dread update. You ready for this one?
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, you weren't here in the last cast. Metroid Dread had just came out. I'd played a little bit of it, and I really spoke highly of it. And definitely, I'm about halfway through the game now, maybe a little less than that. Boss fights are super fun. It's very in terms of the Metroid universe. It kind of has the same boss fight. It has the same boss fight that you've played before in the Super Nintendo era. I wasn't really crazy with that. When I see a game that's come out in the more modern sense, you kind of repeat boss battles. I'm like, you guys can't think of anything new? Like, that's where it starts to bother me a bit. But the introduction of the Emmy is such a cool interface to the game where certain areas have this robot chasing you, and it's a life or death situation. The game is like you die a lot from this Emmy because you're trying to figure out where to go in the area because it's not a puzzle per se, but you just got to find the right way to go, and you're always trying to avoid this robot as you're trying to figure out the correct direction. And each new section, the robot it has a new gimmick to it where this one you have to use your phase suit, and that's the trick to getting past this particular Emmy. And there's like 6 or 7 of these suckers through the game. And you get your it's Metroid. You get your upgrades, fight a boss, get this energy source, and that'll give you the ability to defeat the said robot of the area, and you move along with the game. The Emmy itself will kick the shit out of you as you're trying to figure out where to go. That is inevitable. So it's not that the game is hard, it's just it's meant to be this difficult area that is supposed to, like I said in the last podcast, bring about dread in you. I still really like the game. I'm definitely into it. It's the paths aren't very hard to figure out. When I was playing through Metroid Prime those years ago, I felt I was just going back and forth in circles a lot of the time, and the first person doesn't quite do it for me. This style of Metroid is definitely my thing. Was I asking myself, I wonder what they could do with Metroid if it was like a third-person action kind of game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. And okay, so you sent me this picture here. Legend of Zelda. Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. And I'm really enjoying this. It's probably one of my game of the year at this point. Not that the list is all that big in the first place.
Yeah.
Just haven't been able to play the PS5 games that I've wanted this year. But in terms of Metroid Dread being up there, it's definitely like a top 3 game. There's Death's Door that's really good. I spoke highly of. The Ascent is really good. These are both PC games, so that shows how dire these are. And then, have you ever heard of Strictly Limited Games?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I've spoke about the Cotton reboot that came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, today they've now released for pre-order Cotton 2 and a Saturn Cotton collection that you can get, and I'm really looking at pulling the trigger on both those. I love the Cute 'em Up series of Cotton. They're super rare to get. At the very least, I think I'm going to pull the trigger on the Saturn ones. I think that's a really cool thing because you get 2 games in one, and they're the same price.
Nice.
Yeah, that's kind of my little update there. I still speak highly of Metroid Dread. Might get Cotton. That's where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah, I actually forgot to mention, I also bought Metroid Dread at Fan Expo yesterday.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing your thoughts over it.
And the nice thing about buying it there is that I didn't have to pay tax. So where I would have paid $96, I only had to pay 80.
Oh, wow! Is tax
Yeah.
really that much now?
Seems to be.
Whoa!
I just know that up here in Canada, where Americans would normally pay $60 for their games, we have to pay 80. I think it's like localization stuff.
Oh,
'Cause of
right, yeah,
Quebec.
because it's got to be. It has to be French. Has to be
Yeah.
yeah. I remember that in Canada. That's right. I do remember
Yeah.
those rules. Yeah, PS5
Yeah.
games are going for like $100 there now.
Yeah.
Whew, brutal. Although I do understand. Like, there's a part of me from the kind of capitalist business sense where it's like video games have been the same price for decades. I'm actually shocked. A decade ago it wasn't going up in price the way it was, especially with games being more expensive
Yeah.
or to be made. But that's up to the developers to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. As long as they don't cram in microtransactions, but that seems to be a tall order for big companies nowadays.
Yeah, a few of them.
Yeah. But I have been playing other games besides Iconoclasts. I've been playing more Neo, The World Ends With You, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And the plot hasn't really advanced much. It's starting to feel really repetitive. Although as of last night, I've gotten to a point where things are starting to heat up a bit. But still, it doesn't really measure up to the tighter storytelling of the original. The dialogue is still well written like the first game, although your mileage may vary depending on how much tolerance you have for slang. But the plot advancement is still really slow. And plus, what was apparently supposed to be a big twist after the conclusion of the second week was pretty underwhelming. Still, feels like they're building up to something big, so I'm going to continue with it. And speaking of Square Enix games, have you heard that Sora from Kingdom Hearts is going to be a DLC character in Smash Bros?
Yes, I've heard of this. Don't you worry, Colin.
Damn!
I booed it nonetheless.
Of course you did. I saw some gameplay footage of him, and it looks like he'll be a fun character to play as. And they even put Hollow Bastion from the first game as a stage. Shut up and take my money, Nintendo!
Right. Okay.
And I also finally beat Finding Paradise, which was the sequel to the Moon.
Oh, right.
Not quite as strong as the first game, but it still made me feel things, and I consider that a success. Next up, Imposter Factory.
Imposter
Which is
Factory. Is that the third one or
That's-
something?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it just came out recently. And still haven't heard any news about the anime movie of To the Moon. But I'm still looking forward to it. And that's pretty much everything I've been playing.
All right. Well, with that, let's get into our theme of the day with our new format as I play the drop.
All right.
And with our new format, so in order for I wanted to change things up a little bit. We've stuck to that previous format for I think 2 years now, something along that line.
About
And yeah, so we're sticking with a theme or topic. That's what we're doing now. And the host will get 2 games to pick for each podcast. And the 2 games have to be related to each other in some form of fashion. Could be story related, could be main character related, could be theme related. You get the idea. And we're only doing 2 games. And the objective for this new format is for all of the hosts to play the games longer and develop deeper conversation about the games. And with Halloween coming, I thought it'd be a good idea to do a sort of survival horror theme episode. We've never dove that deep into survival horror. We always have kind of more a general topic of a horror theme exactly. And I picked 2 games I think not a lot of people have played. They have very deep plots, and they're both extremely expensive games.
Uh-huh.
So that was the idea behind these two picks, and there are a couple games I've always kind of had on the back burner of my mind. It's like I want to try these out. Why are they expensive? Why are there so many like think pieces on the internet about these two games? What does that matter? One is by a studio you might recognize, and the other is by a studio you may not recognize.
I think people will recognize both, but we'll get to that.
Okay. And so, with that, going forward for at least a little while, we'll still rotate hosts, but the host that's being in rotation will get 2 games to pick. So we're really cutting it down. We'll probably still end up talking like an hour or whatever for each podcast episode. But hopefully the goal, again, is to develop a deeper conversation over the games. And the first game I chose was Kuon. Both these games are on the PS2, by the way. And Kuon is developed by From Software, so your Dark Souls type people. Published by From Software Japan, Agetic in North America. It came out. We're still sticking with our 15-year rule, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It came out in December 2004 in North America, and in the spring in Japan and Europe Japan in 2004, Europe in 2006. So way different release schedules there. But Kuon is a survival horror game, where it's split into 3 sections. You have the yin, yang, and then the final chapter. Okay? The yin is focused on a character named Utsuki, whom heads to this building of a lord, and it's in like a feudal Japan era. I believe it's the Heian period. And for those that aren't familiar, it's like year 1000 or something or another. So they have to go to this manor, and Utsuki and her sister kind of get split up and whatnot. They're there for one reason or another. And then the Yang period is following Sakuya, a exorcist, if you will, who goes with her, I guess, mentor, teacher type person. And the yin and yang sections have both these characters playing at the same time of each other, going around the manor, and sometimes they kind of cross paths, but not really. And you have to play both sections to get the full grasp of what the story means. So it's one of those, it's not a fragmented story in any way. And then once you complete those, a third character makes the appearance. It's Seimei, and I didn't get that far to play the Seimei section, but from what I was able to gather, Seimei is like God mode ending part where she's got this like giant. It's what's it called? It's the stick. It's the long stick with the blade on the end. Naginata.
Naginata?
Yeah.
That's
Naginata. Yeah, she's got that. She's got like crazy like pyro abilities. It's basically just like a small section at the end where she comes in and finishes out the plot for the game. What did you think of this game, Colin? Kuon.
Well, the fact that it was made by From Software certainly got my attention.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And gave me some Fatal Frame vibes with a little bit of Silent Hill, just with how the atmosphere is laid out.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yep.
Because there's a lot of going through the dark in this one, because your character is always holding a little lantern, and it also kind of reminded me of Siren, I guess.
Yes, glad you brought that up.
And yeah, it's pretty basic gameplay. You're traversing the environment, solving puzzles, occasionally getting into slashing matches with monsters. Although you can also shoot fireballs at them with little little sutras, I guess.
Yeah, little paper talismans that each have a certain ability as you pick up as you go through. Like there's a poison one, there's a poison like spider thing, fire. You get the idea.
Yeah, in the
they're-
video I watched, I don't know if you had the same thing, but the characters' mouths didn't move at all when they were speaking in the cutscenes. It was kind of weird.
No, I didn't have that issue, or at least I didn't notice it.
Huh. That's strange. But it's got some pretty well done sound design, I will say. I mean, everything feels foreboding, and you hear everything. You can tell it's like on the right or to the left. I don't know. And there's a mechanic where you can meditate to calm your nerves after encounters.
Yes. So it's got kind of like this psychometer to it all. When you hit the pause screen, there's a bar at the top of the pause screen that changes colors, and that's kind of your health indication. So you do have rapid health, where you can, eat an herb or something, but then you have meditation that can calm your psyche down, and that'll at least get you some health back. But you're at a standstill. So if you're like in the middle of fighting a creature of some kind, or you're in a boss battle, odds are you won't be able to meditate. So that's where the herbs come in, and then you have limited saves, in which you can pick up kind of save. We'll call them save tokens from defeating enemies. So it really gets you to it really gets you to think like, okay, do I meditate? Do I go back? How many do I have? I never really had an issue going through a good chunk of the game. I still had. It just gets you to not compulsively save. I think that's all it does. Just anytime you cross a path of the save point, I would save, but I never found myself going, okay, before I get into this area, I think I gotta backtrack all the way and save first. I think I only did that like one time, and that was in the yin section, where before I'd like go into this underground area of a shrine, which reveals a whole chunk of plot, by the way, in that section. That was the only area I kind of backtracked for a good like 5 minutes before finding the save point again. What did you think of the combat in this game?
It's kind of dull. I mean, you're just slashing with a knife at least in the section I was watching.
Yep. Yeah, both play the exact same, basically.
Yeah, and sometimes the monsters will jump up on you, and she'll just shove them off. And then sometimes, if you don't see a pool of blood come out from under them, you'll have to torch them with a fireball so they don't get back up.
Right. The bodies did stay around the entire game, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like it when games kind of do that. Resident Evil does that. I thought the gameplay, like the fighting mechanic itself, was just so much ass, and it mostly felt like a waste of time. I think if the game was focused around gathering the sutras, the paper talismans, and the gameplay combat element was simply just that instead of this knife, that would have been way better. But you're so limited on your talismans, kind of seemingly throughout the game, that you use a good majority of them when you eventually get to the very rare boss fights. That would have been a much better element to improve upon in this game. Maybe special talismans that the game tells you, like hints that you should probably only use these during boss fights, and then you have the more basic ones you can gather up throughout the game much more easily. That would have made this a much more enjoyable experience. But as for like, I really like the atmosphere, as you said, the music. I love the design of everything. Each area looked very unique to another. That was like, I never felt like I was running around in circles. The map had this old school kind of top down Japanese style parchment to it. I thought was easy to navigate. Because, when we look back on a game like Siren, for example, in a more modern sense, I felt like I had no direction where to go. The gameplay felt very difficult to get used to. The controls were ass most of the time. But the story was all there. Where Kuon is... Quan's biggest strength is definitely its story and its atmosphere. Did you feel the same?
Honestly, I couldn't follow the story for the life of me. I mean, occasionally there's a cutscene, but it didn't really grab me.
Mm. And why do you think it didn't grab you at first? Was it just too unknown for a good chunk of it?
I think so. Plus, it's like ancient medieval Japanese stuff, and that doesn't really connect with me all that much.
So there is an important part of this game that if you have a background knowledge of, this like medieval Japanese lore to it, makes so much more sense. So the game story is focused around like the lore behind mulberry trees in Japan, and they immediately tell you about the mulberry trees like at the start of the game. And I will admit, at first I didn't know like what the significance was, why this matters, and it like the whole story is about these mulberry trees and your characters and this manor and what's going on here. So before I get into that, I'd like to touch on kind of what you said at the very top of it. It reminds you a lot of Fatal Frame. And the story, the atmosphere, the camera perspective, I agree. So much of it is like Fatal Frame. And I was ready to wholeheartedly love this game. The difference between Fatal Frame and, the series and Kuon is, the in-game combat element. Fatal Frame has the camera obscura, and the whole game's based around utilizing the camera obscura. And you know how I said that if you had kind of a basic talisman attack, that would have done wonders? Well, what does Fatal Frame's camera obscura have? It has a basic camera shot option. So you can just fight enemies throughout the game. That one thing, I think, would have made a load of difference going forward, because that knife attack was more cumbersome than fun.
Yeah, it didn't... There wasn't really much to the combat in that regard. Just felt very slow, and on top of that, the enemies only coming at you one at a time, sort of like Assassin's Creed.
Mm-hmm.
But not as exciting as that.
Yeah. I think the two separate stories that you got to play through, a la Resident Evil 2, I thought that was a good decision, because it gets you to get involved with two different characters. Let's see, how long is this game? Because I played it for quite a while. 9.5 hours. So I played about 7 of it. I got pretty close. I got pretty close to the end here. I played it with a full emulator because the game for Colin, did you look up how much the game costs?
Like $300 or so.
I was about to say, you care to guess?
Or 700?
So it ranges from what region you're at. The Japanese version, which has English options, by the way, for like subtitles, not in the text per se, but you'll get the idea.
Yeah.
The Japanese version is like $35. So if you can get that sucker, yes. The Euro version is $125. The American version, hold on to your butts, $500.
Oh my god.
Fuck off. Oh man.
It's like Chrono Trigger all over again.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane how much this game costs. So I went full emulator on it, obviously. Going back to the story, I mentioned the mulberry tree. So the mulberry tree in like folklore in Japan, my understanding. And the game really goes into heavy lore about it, is the mulberry tree has its own spirit and intelligence. And it's able to conjure up this spirit energy to take on like human forms, and it has to do with like silkworms growing inside the tree, and they are able to have a connect. The silkworms themselves are able to have a connection. And why this is all important is a lot of the creatures are stemmed from the mulberry tree. The ghosts in the game are stemmed from this mulberry tree. The silkworms have spiritual powers, the powers of incarnation and reincarnation. Hence why this like coffin wicker box in the game is so important to the plot. Because the silkworms reside inside, because experiments were done by the I believe it was the exorcists, the head exorcist that Sakuya works under. He does experiments with this box, and it requires X number of we'll call them sacrifices before the spell of the silkworms is unleashed, and it's all about trying to reincarnate various people in the game. I believe it's Utsuki's our yin character's sister. I forget her name. The purpose is to reincarnate these people. And you ready for some spoilers here?
Go ahead.
Okay. So Sakuya is an exorcist. She's trying to figure out like what the fuck happened at this manor, because like all hell broke loose, including the Lord has like turned into this just wacky creature, which is probably the best boss fight in the game. And I'll get into a section of that, a section thought of that in a sec. But turns out Utsuki and her sister are both dead. And
Oh yeah.
as the plot unravels, and you go into the yang section, so you're really supposed to play through the yin first. Utsuki realizes she's dead. She realized she had a hand in her own sister's death. Realizes that her own, like the mulberry tree incarnation of her sister also had something to do with her own death. And Utsuki, unlike her sister, still maintains her sense of humanity, although it keeps getting worse and worse over the course of the realization as you play through the yang and the final section of the game. And
Okay.
it's like when everything starts to unravel, it's not, I don't want to say it's butterfly effecty, but everything starts to make sense and come together, and you just go, okay, that's really cool. That's really cool. I like that. This makes sense now. It's a lot of aha moments, which I thought was done well.
Neat.
Yeah. And the gameplay picks up a notch. Now, where this game loses me is it's so slow. You can't.
Yeah.
It has a run option, but the run option is really just for boss fights. And by the way, boss fights, way too far in between. It just doesn't happen enough, does not happen fast enough. So you just find yourself aimlessly wandering and walking at this slow fucking pace. It just seems like you're getting nothing done and nothing is progressing. That's a major flaw, along with the combat. This is why I believe the game has simply a cult following and not a great following.
Yeah. I found it to be really boring when I watched it, just because, I mean, it was a struggle just to get through half an hour of it, because it was so slow. I mean, sure, the idea of the visuals is good, but the graphics themselves are pretty muddy.
Well, it's kind of by design, because you're going around this like bloody environment. Everything's gray and brown. It's all about creating that atmosphere with how the graphics are.
Yeah, and that's sort of where the Silent Hill comparison comes from as well.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, instead of fog, you've got darkness.
Right. Yeah,
But
you can't ever see into the distance. I thought the cameras were really good in this game. The camera work, like what angles
yeah,
certain sections were at, the cutscenes / loading screens when you go section to section. I thought I had a nice little in-between visual for you as you get into the next section. There's a lot to love about this game, but the glaring flaws are right in your face from the get-go.
yeah, for sure.
But once...
Plus,
Yeah, go on,
I
Colin.
I didn't really find the puzzles to be all that engaging either.
No, they're very uninteresting. You have to siphon through various notebooks and scriptures to figure out the puzzle, and it basically just tells you right then and there what it is. Probably one of the more memorable ones is you're collecting like wooden planks or discs, and you place it in. You just go, okay, what order does the bat or the what were the other two? It's like a bat, a beast, or something or another, and you just read a scripture that's kind of in this. It's supposed to be this puzzle or riddle to figure out, but it basically just says the beast eats the man. You go, okay, so it goes before the man. It's like nothing complicated. We're not talking
yeah.
Silent Hill piano level puzzle here.
But yeah, I gotta give this a soft fail. I mean, it has a lot going for it, but what sucks about it really sucks.
Yeah, I mean, what I liked in the game, I really liked, but what I didn't like in the game, I didn't like. I'm exactly in the middle with it, but because the big crux of the game is in fact gameplay to me, unlike a Fatal Frame, that's my big baseline for this, is I want this to be like Fatal Frame so bad, because it has the story that's just like Fatal Frame, it has the environment, has the atmosphere, has the characters. The character designs I thought were phenomenal with the long black hair, the kimono flowing the whole time, the lantern like everything's done so well until you get to the very basics, and that's where this game fails. Like I said, that's what's holding this game back from being what everyone wants to like, as opposed to the general consensus when it first came out, where it gets like 57 ranks out of 100.
Yeah.
There's a good reason for that, and we figured that out firsthand. There is a great game here. Like if we were talking about we should actually start playing a factor. If this was remade, would it then be a good game if they changed some elements up? And I think if you just changed the basic elements up, which I don't think it would be that difficult, this could be a fantastic remake.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it'd be really easy to do. Like I don't think we're talking too much here. Maybe you can add a couple bosses. I think that's where it gets a little more complicated. add more stuff in between to have. I'll give it a soft pass as well, but there is something here for what that's worth. Okay.
All right.
The next game, as I pull up how long it is and how much it is, because this is where I will be sure to hit first and foremost. Yep. So my second game I picked was Rule of Rose, also on the PS2. Also came out in 2006, so it's just on that passing line. Japan, January 2006. North America, September 2006. So just passes, Colin. How about that?
Yeah.
Developed by Punchline. Why does this mean
No relation
something
to the anime? No relation to the anime, I'm assuming.
Right. Published by Atlas North America. So Atlas is a big time publisher, and then 505 Games in Europe probably know them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 505 known for I believe it's like Dead by Daylight and Control.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Rule of Rose, survival horror, set in England in 1930. So we're going from old ass era Japan to Depression England.
Yeah.
And it's exactly a psychological horror with survival horror gameplay to it all. And the game takes 10 hours to beat just about, and it goes for, in Japan and Europe, $200+, and in America, do you care to guess, Colin?
400.
Very close. $478 is what it's currently listed at. So again,
Man.
very expensive. Rule of Rose is another sort of deep plot element to it all. Huge story, lot to break down, and where it gets a little confusing is the story is fragmented into two parts. So you see another connection there. In Kuon, it was fragmented into two halves, played at the same time, while Rule of Rose is a singular character played between kind of a past and present to it all. Where it gets confusing is you realize that a lot of the game is more or less in her own head, played out through her PTSD and her remembering a lot of elements happening.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Your main character is a 19-year-old girl named Jennifer, and it is a very disturbing game with what what the story is and what it's telling you. And gameplay, however, is... Oh, about you, Colin. Gameplay, I thought, was a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. It's something that was mentioned in the reviews for both this and Kuon. It was that the gameplay was very lackluster.
Yeah, you get various melee items, but you got a knife and a pipe and I think a shovel at some point, and the enemies.
Did you also get a gun?
Well, sort of.
Eventually?
Yeah, sort of. I didn't really get as far with the gun, but I did look up the ending, which does involve a gun. I'll get into the end in a second, because I played about 5 hours of this sucker. So just over, basically just over halfway to the point. And this takes a lot from Silent Hill in the aspects of the game and narrative elements that it's really trying to tell you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great idea. The problem I had with it was, again, we go back to the melee gameplay element, where I just found myself finding that more cumbersome. I was just running around these children with paper bags over their heads the whole time. And I never felt the game was scary, but it definitely had this unnerving, uncomfortable element to it, which is a different kind of fear.
Yeah. And it's basically creepy children, the game.
Well, yeah, kind of. That's what the whole story is about: creepy children, and more importantly, one creepy child.
Yeah.
So let me break down this plot for you. So Jennifer is kind of on a park bench, and there's a dog, and then she sees like kids playing in a garden, and she goes through PTSD to the point where her traveling on a bus and getting locked out is all an imagery to her mind taking her on a journey through her past. Not really tough to figure out there immediately. And then the game takes place between two locations. One is an orphanage called the Rose Orphanage, and then the other is on a Zeppelin. Okay? And as you play through, you kind of switch between these places, and it is up to you, the player, to make your own connections between the stories, which that can be quite a tall task when you're trying to tell this complicated psychological story to it all. So Jennifer, as you play through the game, more or less her job is to just open doors and go from location to location. There's really nothing like to it at all. You're just picking up a shiny off the ground. It shows you like a storybook thing element to it, and you just kind of correspond things accordingly. It's like the hardest element is you just putting the story together. It's not actually playing the game. Where the story unfolds is you're at this orphanage where Jennifer grew up, so to say, and then the Zeppelin where you find out pretty quick, and you figure it out that the Zeppelin crashes, her family dies in it, and this dude named, I think his name's Gary or something, or Garrett, I forget. This dude, coping with the death of his son, kidnaps Jennifer and basically makes her play the role of his dead son. And it gets really creepy. He's an alcoholic. He's full on depression. He wants to kill himself like throughout the game. He even refers to Jennifer and makes her take on the name of the son. And then during that period, a girl from the orphanage, like nearby, befriends Jennifer, and she develops this like unhealthy cling relationship to her. And they exchange items, and then as Jennifer gets older, she develops a bond with a stray dog, which then, this is where it gets even more strange, is the other girl of the orphanage starts to become jealous. And the girl's name's Wendy, in case I didn't say that earlier. So Wendy gets overly jealous and develops this like crazy hierarchy in the orphanage just to make Jennifer's every waking moment a living hell, along with the dude that like kidnapped her. She like trains him to be a stray dog. So you see the connections in psychological warfare there, and the connecting plot lines. And if the other kids in the orphanage disobey Wendy, she puts them through like horrible experiences, like spiders and various insects and shit, like goes in your face, like putting a rat on a stick and shove it against your face, like really disturbing things. And all in a subplot throughout this all is the orphan like caretaker. He has let's not beat around the bush here. He molests these kids. So that's why they're fucked up in their heads. So the real bad guy is the depression father and the orphanage caretaker. Like, these people are fucked up beyond repair. Okay?
Yeah.
Like, this game does not hold anything back. So from a story standpoint and playing it out and like not holding back, I enjoyed what I was experiencing. But as for this being a fragmented story and the puzzles that were there to unlock each further puzzle and section, none of that hit very well for me. And I know I've been talking a long time, Colin, but I really felt like that there was a lot to break down there. What did you feel playing the game, story-wise? Like, what were your thoughts?
Well, oddly, I found it easier to follow than Kuon.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's just because it was in a setting that's a little more familiar to me.
Yeah, that would make sense, right? Yeah. Yeah, if you didn't look up the mulberry bush thing, you'd just be totally lost for the majority of the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Mulberry tree. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sure, the opening was pretty trippy because there's just so much going on you don't have any context for, but you can kind of piece it together. sort of. And the graphics are really good. They're a lot more crisp than in Kuon.
Right.
And you can definitely see the inspiration from Silent Hill in there. Because it's, sure, there's no fog, but just the way the colors are used and the camera angles just gave me very much a Silent Hill vibe, but I also got a little bit of a Deadly Premonition vibe from what little I've seen of that one.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that.
And I kind of like the menu aesthetic where everything's rendered as chalkboard drawings.
Yep.
And whenever
representative
you
of children and yeah.
And plus every movement you make through the menu, it sounds like chalk on a chalkboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just more interested in this one than Kuon. And even though I didn't watch that much more of it, I find this one to be the better game, just for my money.
Well,
sure, the gameplay wasn't much better.
No.
Since, as we went over earlier, I didn't see that much in the way of puzzles either. Most I saw was her picking up a bucket and putting it on this scarecrow thing.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely nothing to the actual gameplay of what we're doing here. And I'm like, you know what this came across to me? A modern kind of cinematic game experience, kind of like an Until Dawn type thing.
Yeah.
Like if I was given choices of certain things instead of just wandering around picking up shinies and then essentially doing nothing throughout the time, I think in a modern sense, that's where this game could be remade to be something much more worthwhile in an experience. Because if you're going to make a story-ridden game with lazy puzzles and seemingly no combat to speak of, then that would be better served in that manner.
Yeah. Although, for my money, even if the game is basically you wandering around picking up stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be terrible. I mean, that's a lot of what goes on in To the Moon, and that's one of my 3 favorite games of all time. So I don't hold that too much against it. It just, if you're going to have that kind of gameplay, you better have a pretty damn strong narrative and aesthetic to go with it.
Well, it just seems that these deeper narrative survival horror games, they, instead of just embracing the whole story part and you're trying to play that, there's always this unnecessary, and this is 2 games in a row where we have the same complaint, where it's almost like this unnecessarily low-level combat for the sake of having it.
Yeah, it felt like a token effort.
Yeah, and then it just really brings the game down because it slows the pace. You can't, it gets unnecessarily frustrating in sections. And this is another game where it's like, okay, I have boss fights, and they're so few and far between. It just takes forever for anything to get going of note. And when you finally get to certain plot elements, just like in Kuon, like, I've already put so much time into this. Like, let's get it going. I mean, that's why when Control first came out, a game that's kind of universally loved, something we both really like, one complaint is, why did it take like 2 hours for this sucker to get going? Why is this? Why is that necessary? It's such a gross misstep in trying to tell a story and trying to get some sort of gameplay in there for you to get invested into.
Yeah, that's true. Although for my money, as far as Control is concerned, it didn't bother me that much. I was still invested in what the hell was happening. I wanted to know more.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't walking around the environment like I was in Kuon, so it did feel faster in a weird pace sense. but I was still just opening every door in the house and then having a child go, no, and close it right in front of me. Like, you cock. Out of here. Did any of the plot elements make you overly uncomfortable? Because that was a huge topic of issue when this game came out, to the point where it was even canceled in the UK.
I don't think I got quite as far as a lot of the stuff you mentioned, like with the dad and the caretaker. But I think doing it that way, just, it takes balls. It's a pretty ballsy thing to do. It actually kind of reminded me of I think it was the manga version of, Higurashi When They Cry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it reminded me of like one of the antagonist's backstories in an abusive orphanage. There was a lot of fucked up shit going on in that one too, and what you mentioned reminded me of that. So I don't think it's that bad, but then again, I've seen a lot of fucked up shit in entertainment over the course of my adult years, so maybe I'm just a bit desensitized to it.
I think, like, my take is on uncomfortable narratives, uncomfortable elements to a story you're wanting to tell, and like if you're gonna go psychological in like molestation and psychologically abusive relationships, then doing it right is really tough, especially in today's world. Like, there's no way in hell this game comes out in the modern era. There's zero chance.
Yeah,
like people just would
sure.
not be able to this current generation just would not be able to handle it, especially like a Brothers Grimm type narrative, because all those stories are very fucked up. And when you start breaking down Rule of Rose to the point of like camera angles getting shot up like teenagers' skirts and young adults, and obsessive like moral choices between main characters, the amount of it, like, you're meant to be uncomfortable because that's the type of horror that's being portrayed here. When you get, so there's a section in this game, Colin, it's near the end, where Wendy, in the state of alcoholic depression that father's in, she literally trains this dude to be a fucking dog, and
oh yeah,
she unleashes him on the orphanage. The goal is to beat the shit out of our main character. Well, because he's now a wild animal, he murders all of the children in the orphanage horribly.
Jesus.
And the final factor is our main character gives him the gun he wants to consistently shoot himself in the head with throughout the game, and that brings him peace of mind to be human again, in which, well, I think we know what happens. And further psychologically damages our main character. It's really wild stuff. And when you're able to pull traumatic experiences together in a story like that, this is where Rule of Rose is at its strongest. Can you, as a player, be able to handle these things? I gotta say that if you're gonna do it, like if I'm to critique something for a story of this maturity, that you have to establish your plot very early and to let the player know, like, this is what you're getting into, and if you can't handle this, put the game down. I'm not sure it handles that well enough early enough for you, the player, to figure out, okay, this is some fucked up shit. Because at the beginning, it just comes across as like a girl whose parents died and she's trying to cope with it. And that's not quite it. It's about like murder and people being molested and psychologically controlled through various horrid aspect after another.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. In the game, I didn't really like the gameplay and puzzles. I thought that was lazy. It was very force-fed in. I kind of give this. I liked Kuon more, just from my personal taste. But I thought both games were pretty much equal to each other, and it's a soft pass. They both suffered from, to me, two similar issues at its basic core. But the plot elements I thought were done really well for the most part.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give this a soft pass.
Just because you could kind of connect with it a little bit more and break it down better.
Yeah.
Or easier. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So once again, our two games were Kuon on the PS2 and Rule of Rose on the PS2. I preferred Kuon. You preferred Rule of Rose. What did you score these? What's your tier listings?
I gave Kuon a D.
Oh my god, harsh.
And I gave Rule of Rose a C.
Okay.
Would be a B or an A if the gameplay were better.
I see. I just gave both games a C. Although that was yeah, that was fair. It's just the gameplay. It just brings them down too much for me. I guess we'll just round up so both get C's. We'll just be simple about it. Colin, you got the next theme for episode 103. What did you pick?
I picked rhythm games.
All right.
There's one game in particular I've been waiting so long to talk about, and as of the date of recording for our next episode, it will have just squeaked into our 15-year-old
excellent
category.
Well, it'll be fun to discuss on the next episode. We will see you next time.
Bye now.